Every day we hold money in our hands, pay with our cards, save it, and spend it. But have you ever stopped to wonder where money actually came from? Why are some banknotes worth a fortune while others are worth almost nothing? Who invented the first coins? Why were square banknotes once printed? Who created Bitcoin and why? And how do stores and giant corporations influence the choices we make? In this video, you'll discover 50 of the most unusual, surprising, and sometimes unbelievable facts about money. Some of them might completely change the way you think about what money really is. Let's get started. Money didn't always look the way it does today. The first real coins appeared about 2,500 years ago in the ancient kingdom of Lydia, located in what is now Turkey. Centuries later, China changed history again by becoming the first country to use paper money. The reason was simple: carrying around bags full of heavy coins was just too inconvenient. But coins and paper money didn't appear overnight. Before them, people used some truly unexpected things as money. In some places, it was pieces of leather. In ancient Sparta, people used heavy iron money to make it harder to build up wealth, and on the Pacific island of Yap, people used enormous stone discs weighing several tons. These stones were called rai, and their value depended not only on their size, but also on how difficult they were to quarry and transport to the island. The most amazing part? These coins were almost never moved. When ownership changed, everyone on the island simply had to know that the stone now belonged to someone else. Sometimes though, money itself becomes a treasure. The most expensive coin ever sold went for more than $18 million. It was the 1933 American gold coin known as the Double Eagle. Its incredible value comes from the fact that almost the entire mintage was destroyed, leaving only a handful of surviving coins and making it one of the rarest coins in history. But sometimes money becomes valuable not because of its age or rarity, but because of a mistake. An ordinary banknote with the wrong color, an off-center print, or another production error can be worth thousands of times more than its face value. These bills rarely make it into circulation, so collectors are willing to pay huge amounts for them. Today, some of the world's most valuable banknotes aren't kept in banks. They're hidden away in private collections owned by people searching for rare printing errors and one-of-a-kind finds. Today, most money doesn't even exist in physical form. Around 90% of the world's money is nothing more than numbers stored in bank computer systems. We usually think of money as cash, bills, and coins, but in reality, enormous amounts of wealth exist only as digital records in bank accounts. But where does all this digital money actually come from? One of the main sources is loans. When a bank lends money to a person or a business, it doesn't simply hand over existing money. It creates a new balance in that account. That's how most new money enters the banking system. Now think about this. Why can an ordinary piece of paper be worth so much? The answer is simpler than you might think. Because we all believe it is. If people suddenly stopped trusting money tomorrow, banknotes would become nothing more than worthless pieces of paper. The truth is, money gets its value not from what it's made of, but from the trust of billions of people around the world. Even $1 million doesn't always mean the same thing. Years ago, the US dollar was backed by gold, so its value was directly tied to the country's gold reserves. But over time, that system changed, and inflation gradually reduced the purchasing power of money. That's why $1 million today buys far less than it did just a few decades ago. Wait a second, Nas. If banks can just create money, why can't everyone be rich? It sounds simple. Just give everyone $1 million. But there's one problem. Creating more money doesn't create more goods or services. If the amount of money keeps growing while the amount of things stays the same, prices simply go up and the money itself loses value. That's why central banks can create money, but they can't create real wealth out of thin air. But even money doesn't last forever. A typical banknote stays in circulation for only a few years before worn-out bills are collected, destroyed, or recycled. Some banknotes pass through thousands of hands before disappearing for good. But if money is just paper and numbers, why can't you simply print a few bills at home? Because real banknotes aren't made from ordinary paper. For example, US dollar bills are made from a blend of cotton and linen, making them much stronger than regular paper. That's why real money can survive thousands of folds and stay in circulation for years. Banknotes are so durable that they can even survive an accidental trip through the washing machine without falling apart. You can wash them, take them out, let them dry, and keep using them like nothing happened. But durable paper is only the beginning. Real banknotes contain dozens of security features designed to make counterfeiting extremely difficult. Many bills have embedded security threads, while certain images and symbols can only be seen from specific angles or under ultraviolet light. That's why modern money is less like a piece of paper and more like a small masterpiece of engineering. Some countries decided that even the toughest paper wasn't enough. Instead, they started making banknotes out of a special type of plastic. Australia was one of the first countries to switch completely to polymer banknotes. They last longer, resist water much better, and are far harder to counterfeit. Then one day, people created money you can't even touch. That's how cryptocurrency was born. Digital money that exists only online and doesn't rely directly on banks. The most famous of them is Bitcoin. Its first real-world purchase became legendary. In 2010, a programmer paid 10,000 BTC for 2 pizzas. Today, those Bitcoins would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That's gotta be the most expensive lunch ever. But Bitcoin has one brutal downside. If you lose access to your wallet, getting your money back is almost impossible. Because of forgotten passwords, people have permanently lost billions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency. Some even accidentally threw away hard drives containing their Bitcoin keys. Imagine that. Somewhere in a landfill, there could still be devices holding millions of dollars in Bitcoin, but no one will ever be able to access them. But perhaps the biggest mystery surrounding Bitcoin isn't its price. To this day, no one knows who actually created it. The person or group of people using the name Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared shortly after launching Bitcoin, never revealing their true identity. Many people think Bitcoin was the first digital currency, but that's not true. Back in the 1990s, several projects tried to create electronic money for the internet. They never became popular, but their ideas later helped lay the foundation for Bitcoin and the entire cryptocurrency industry. And that's probably what makes Bitcoin so different from traditional money. It has no central bank or government controlling it. That's why some countries have tried to ban it. For example, China completely banned Bitcoin mining and trading, but Bitcoin itself keeps running because its network can't simply be switched off with the push of a button. So what exactly is Bitcoin and why is it worth anything? At its core, it's digital money that exists only on the internet. Its value isn't backed by gold or any government. It comes from the fact that millions of people around the world are willing to buy, sell, and use it. There's one more important detail. From the very beginning, its code was designed so there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoins. Why did Satoshi Nakamoto choose that exact number? He never explained it. Cryptocurrencies were created as an alternative to banks, but despite that, banks never went away. In fact, today, almost all the world's money moves through them. The first banks appeared around 600 years ago in Italy. Their main purpose was simple: to keep people's money safe and lend it to those who needed it. But just 60 or 70 years ago, withdrawing cash from an ATM was impossible because ATMs didn't exist. The first ATM appeared in the 1960s, and even earlier, the first bank cards were made from ordinary cardboard. It's hard to believe that technologies we now take for granted are actually so recent. Have you ever wondered why a PIN is usually just 4 digits long? At first, it was supposed to be longer to make it more secure, but during testing, researchers found that people had trouble remembering longer codes, so the PIN was shortened to 4 digits. Sometimes convenience matters more than maximum security. What if paper money becomes a rarity in just a few decades? In many countries, people already use cash less and less, and in some cities, you can go an entire month without ever opening your wallet. That's why many experts believe cash could gradually disappear in the future. Maybe one day we won't even need wallets at all. Even today, in some stores, you can pay just by looking into a camera or placing your finger on a scanner. And many experts believe that in the future, money will become even more deeply integrated into our phones, watches, and other devices, becoming an almost invisible part of everyday life. But paying with your face may be just the beginning. Some experts believe money will become programmable in the future. For example, it could be sent with rules that allow it to be spent only on certain products or before a specific date. And that idea is no longer science fiction. Bitcoin's rise even caught the attention of governments. Today, central banks in many countries are already developing their own digital currencies. But unlike Bitcoin, these currencies will be issued and fully controlled by the government. But the more money moves into the digital world, the more scammers appear. That's why banks now use artificial intelligence to detect suspicious transactions in just seconds. Sometimes these systems spot fraud before the victim even realizes someone is trying to scam them. But no matter how well money is protected, there have always been people trying to steal it. And sometimes we're not talking about millions. We're talking about amounts that sound almost unbelievable. One of the biggest financial thefts in history brought criminals more than $1 billion, a sum so enormous it's hard to imagine even today. But not every robbery looks like something out of an action movie. Sometimes the biggest heists succeed because because of clever planning, not gunfights. For example, one of the most famous bank robberies in US history happened without a single shot being fired. In 1972, a group of criminals dug a tunnel into the vault of United California Bank and escaped with about $30 million. But money isn't stolen only through robberies. Sometimes criminals never even touch your bank account. They simply convince people to hand over their money willingly. The most surprising part is that many scams have existed for centuries and still work today. Only the methods have changed. It used to be letters and forged documents, while today it's phone calls, fake websites, and the internet. But some of the most dangerous scammers didn't steal money directly. They convinced people to hand over their life savings. One of the most famous con artists in history, Charles Ponzi, promised investors huge profits out of almost nothing. He sold people the dream of easy money, but in reality, he paid earlier investors using money from new ones. That's how the famous Ponzi scheme was born, and even more than a century later, scammers around the world still use the same trick. But not every robbery ends with the criminals disappearing forever. There have been cases where thieves unexpectedly returned part of the stolen money. Sometimes it was because they felt guilty, feared getting caught, or realized that hiding a fortune can be much harder than stealing one. Sometimes people end up with huge amounts of money not because of theft or fraud, but because of a system error. For example, in 2009, an American named Tyler Fisher logged into his bank account and found more than $100 million sitting there because of a banking glitch. Of course, the money wasn't his, and the bank later fixed the mistake, but for a few minutes, he was technically a multimillionaire, all because of one random error. But scammers weren't the only ones to use money as a weapon. Entire governments did it too. During World War II, Nazi Germany launched Operation Bernhard, a secret plan to print counterfeit British pounds in an attempt to destroy confidence in the UK's currency and weaken its economy. It became one of the largest counterfeiting operations in history, but during wars, money didn't just need to be counterfeited, it also needed to be protected. That's why some banks stored enormous reserves deep underground. For example, famous vaults were built beneath layers of rock and earth to protect gold and money from wars, thieves, and bombings. Some of these places are still surrounded by mysteries and legends today, but sometimes money disappears, not because of mistakes or counterfeits, but because it is simply lost to time. Throughout history, there have been cases where stolen millions were never found, even decades later, and with them came legends of hidden treasures, secret maps, lost vaults, and buried fortunes worth millions that people are still searching for today. We've seen how money was created, disappeared, and even used as a weapon. But that raises another question: who actually owns most of the world's money? The answer is surprising. Wealth is distributed extremely unevenly. The richest 10% of people own around 75% of the world's wealth, while half of the global population owns only a small fraction of the total. Some fortunes are so massive that one person couldn't possibly spend all that money in a lifetime. For example, if someone had $100 billion and spent $1 million every single day, it would still take more than 270 years to spend it all. That's why the wealth of the richest people in the world is on a scale that is almost impossible to imagine as ordinary money. But billionaires haven't always existed. For most of history, even the richest people on Earth never had fortunes anywhere close to this size. The first person whose wealth officially surpassed $1 billion appeared only in the 20th century. His name was John D. Rockefeller, an oil tycoon who built his fortune through the company Standard Oil. But even John D. Rockefeller wasn't the richest person in history. When adjusted for inflation, some rulers and empire builders may have been worth several times more than today's billionaires. For example, the African ruler Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire was believed to have possessed such enormous wealth that his fortune is almost impossible to calculate accurately. But billionaires usually don't keep their money as giant piles of cash. Most of their wealth is tied up in company shares they own. That's why a person can become poorer by tens of billions of dollars in a single day, just because the value of their company's stock suddenly drops. But the biggest amounts of money in the world aren't only controlled by billionaires. There are companies that manage trillions of dollars, even though that money doesn't actually belong to them. For example, BlackRock manages assets worth several trillion dollars, but that money belongs to its clients. The people considered the richest are usually those who own massive stakes in their own companies. But how huge are the fortunes of the world's richest people really? For example, Elon Musk's net worth has exceeded $300 billion at certain points. If that money were divided among everyone on Earth, each person would receive roughly $35 to $40. And that shows something important. The fortune of one of the richest people in the world is enormous for one individual, but compared to the entire population of the planet, it looks very different. But wealth isn't only about how much money someone earns. A huge role is played by habits that often develop during childhood. The way a person treats money, whether they spend everything immediately, save it, or invest it, is often shaped long before they receive their first paycheck. But sometimes our financial habits aren't shaped only by us. Stores and brands intentionally influence the way we spend money. They use psychological tricks to make people buy more. For example, a price of $9.99 feels much cheaper than $10, even though the difference is only 1 cent. Our brains see it as 9 and something instead of 10. But stores influence our decisions with more than just prices. Colors, music, smells, and even the way products are arranged are carefully designed to make people stay longer and buy more. For example, the most expensive or profitable products are often placed at eye level because those are the ones shoppers notice first. But stores aren't the only ones that can influence how much we spend. Even the way we pay changes how we think about money. Studies show that people often find it easier to spend money when paying by card rather than cash. When we don't see physical bills leaving our wallet, the purchase feels less painful, and we may end up spending more. But even when we think we're making financial decisions ourselves, our emotions often control our choices. People usually feel the pain of losing money more strongly than the happiness of gaining the same amount. For example, losing $100 can upset someone much more than receiving an unexpected $100 would make them happy. Throughout these 49 facts, we've seen that money is much more than just paper and numbers. Behind it are history, power, technology, psychology, and the decisions people make every day. But we'll leave the 50th fact up to you. Write your most unusual or little known fact about money in the comments. Maybe your fact will be something other viewers discover for the first time because of you. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. See you in the next one.